How's it going, everyone? Hope you're having a good day. And before we get into the iPad, do you guys remember the first tablets, the Linus Right Top from 1987, or maybe the GridPad, which launched 2 years later and was primarily only adopted by the US government? Okay, maybe you don't, neither do I. I wasn't alive during that time, but these devices were some of the first true stepping stones that eventually led us to Apple's true first tablet, if you can call it a tablet, which was the Message Pad. The Message Pad aimed to create a new category of device that didn't replace the PC, but offered a sort of sidekick PDA. Then eventually Microsoft made their first tablet computer in 2000, and then 10 years later, with many different iterations and companies taking their own shots at making a tablet, we end up in today's age where we have these tablets, which are a little bit more technologically advanced than what we had back in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. Now, in the past 3 or 4 years, the iPad has pretty much dominated the pro tablet category, where it sits in between the iPhone and the MacBook. And you hear the question being thrown around a lot is whether or not you can replace your computer with just an iPad. I treat this as a standalone device where it doesn't necessarily replace my computer. It's sort of like an alternative creative device. It can replace your computer for a lot of people, but then a lot of people absolutely cannot use this as a full-time device replacement. Spoiler alert, my thoughts on this topic haven't really changed over the years. I really like the iPad Pro, so it's no surprise that I do have one and use one every single day, but I have a MacBook, just like I have a PC. But this device is really unique in the way you use it and the way it's just so portable and so quick. The thing about it though, that kind of changed the game was when Apple finally put the M1 in here. Now, it unlocked it in a lot of ways, but then at the same time, we still have a lot of restrictions because of iPadOS. But let's talk about the last year. One of the first impressions you get with an iPad Pro is how it feels in the hand, especially with the smaller 11-inch, the balance and weight feel really good in the hand. The M1 model also stayed essentially the same with design choices, so it's boxy, has slim enough bezels where you don't find yourself accidentally touching the screen, and overall, even in the larger 12.9-inch form factor, it's excellent. It doesn't feel like you're pushing the lines of just carrying a monitor around. They are both still reasonable sizes for whatever you plan on doing, whether it's watching movies, videos, gaming, productivity, multitasking. It's a solid size, and it's up to you whether you want the 11-inch or the 12.9-inch. I have both of them, and I think, honestly, it's personal decision. The larger 12.9-inch model does have the Liquid Retina XDR display that's powered by mini LED, which is awesome screen. Unfortunately, if you get the 11-inch model, you don't get that updated screen. It's unfortunate, but the 11-inch form factor is pretty awesome. Either way, the screen on the iPad Pro has been really good, even if you go back to the 2018 model, which is still in my daily rotation and rocking 120 Hertz. And that iPad still hasn't slowed down enough for my use case where I felt the need to upgrade. So the M1 was a huge leap in performance. We get a full-fledged desktop grade chip, we get the upgraded RAM capabilities, and this thing backlogs apps for what feels like forever. That being said though, is it that much crazier in day-to-day usage versus an older 2018 iPad, for example? I really can't tell the difference when it comes to just normal stuff. Now, maybe if you're getting towards layers and you need the extra RAM, I think you can, or if you just need the overall capabilities of the LiDAR sensor, it might be worth upgrading to. That being said, iPadOS 15 was probably not what we all anticipated as a full-fledged overhaul of iPadOS, and it was sort of like the normal iPadOS updates we kind of get. It did clean up multitasking, it bumped up the RAM consumption limit on apps, so you can now take advantage of the upgraded RAM on these guys, which is nice. The cleaned up multitasking, and given when you pair with the lightning fast UI plus 120 Hertz, there's a reason why this feels so good to use. And there's a couple things I've noticed that I would personally love to see in the future. Number one is camera placement. So pretty much every third-party keyboard, or even the Magic Keyboard, places the iPad in landscape mode when you're using it, which means anytime I'm using the front face camera for either FaceTime or video chats, since the camera is on the side, even with center stage reframing you, you kind of appear to be looking off into a 1,000-yard stare. Even the new Samsung Galaxy Tab has its camera in a pretty solid spot, and Apple even has an indicator that lets you know when you're covering the camera, so they did expect people to accidentally cover this when they're holding it in landscape mode. Also, the upgraded Thunderbolt capabilities are really nice for the USB-C port on the bottom. Because of that M1 chip, you can now get up to 40 gigs per second for importing photos or videos. It's really nice. The external display support is okay. The aspect ratio unfortunately kills me, where in 16:9 monitors, there are black bars on the side. So it's kind of always been that way. I feel like I don't really use the iPad with external displays that much. It's more often the opposite, where I use the iPad as an external display for a Mac in Sidekick mode. It would be nice if in the future they kind of fix this up a little bit, but for right now, external display support is okay. Now, covering speakers, no surprise, they are awesome, plenty loud, rich, clean sound, and Apple has been nailing audio on their devices for a while, so this isn't a surprise. And the overall accessory game with the iPad Pro, as you've seen if you watch a ton of videos out there, there is a ton of stuff to custom tailor this iPad for your personal experience, whether you want to use a pencil if you're an artist, or you want to use a keyboard if you're a writer. There's a lot of different alternatives, and you can pick a lot of things for your custom needs. Okay, so quickly covering the Magic Keyboard, which I don't have on hand right now, but I do use occasionally when you have it in laptop mode. Unfortunately, it is a bit strangely balanced when you have it on your lap, and ultimately quite expensive at $350. It would be cool if in the future it activated a sort of pro mode like Samsung's DeX, but right now it's just a keyboard. So if you like that, party on and go get one. So okay, we have a device that is so overwhelmingly powerful and exciting to use, but at the same time, very complicated to judge. It sort of walks the line between what's considered a typical computer and breaks the flow of when you want to jump off a laptop and do something a bit more exciting. What separates the iPad from being a glorified iPhone is ultimately iPadOS. iPadOS has gotten a bit more refined over the years, but at the same time is the limiting factor that the iPad Pro has always had. Like, I'm not gonna go ahead and talk about how we need Final Cut Pro or we need these specific apps. It's kind of the bigger picture. I think a lot of people need larger desktop-grade applications for this to actually be able to replace their workflow as their main device. More desktop-grade apps and OS flexibility equals more functional usage of power on the iPad Pro. It's very unique, and I feel like it's always been its own category for pretty clear reasons. Apple is digging out their own tablet category to keep it free from eating into their MacBook sales, and the overall creative aspect and unique capabilities make it really great to use, especially for those that can adapt their workflows, whether it's 3D modelers, artists, or just basic office work. There are limitations there, but if you can use this as your full-time device or even as a side device, it's a great device. And iPadOS has made strides to make things feel better, but at the same time hasn't made it feel that much less limited. Hey, everyone's needs are different, and some people find that they can do everything they need just with an iPad Pro, and others can't. Whether it's missing an app like Blender, for example, your mileage may vary. Now, when does Apple finally unleash the power of the M1 and M2 in the future? When do things get interesting? Maybe when other competitors step their game up and eat away at Apple's shares in the high-end tablet category, like if Samsung begins to turn up the heat as a solid competitor in the market. But even then, I feel like it's gonna be a while before we see full-fledged desktop-grade applications on the iPad, not to mention the complexity now that there is with picking a device, whether it's in the MacBook lineup or in the iPad lineup, because things have gotten even more complicated. I feel like in a lot of cases, the MacBook Air is going to check a lot of boxes for most people, and then those who need the extra juice can pick up a MacBook Pro. But now you have the iPad Air, which really isn't that much different than the iPad Pro, and their pricing is very similar as well. So it's wacky. All I can tell you is hopefully iPadOS 15 laid down the foundation for iPadOS 16's overhaul, and maybe turn the iPad Pro into a true laptop killer. I doubt it. All I can tell you is this guy exists in my usage as an awesome mobile device that's refreshing to kick back on, watch videos on, and occasionally do some work with it, while I leave the heavier stuff to the MacBook or the PC. And the new models are really good, but don't overlook some of the older models that at the same time can save you a pretty penny and are still crushing through a bunch of tasks without skipping a beat. What I can leave you with is a quote by Steve Jobs: "If you don't cannibalize yourself, someone else will." Let's see what the future holds for the iPad, and let me know how you use your iPad, or whether or not you can't, in the comments down below. I'd definitely be interested in seeing your personal experience. Thank you guys so much for watching. Catch you guys in the next one.